Hey, this is Beth from the Gun Blog Variety Cast reminding y'all that this podcast is a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. Check out all the other great podcasts at selfdefenseradio.net.
You're listening to the Remso Republic.
Happy Halloween.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this special episode. You know, when you do this so often, you kind of jump into trying to give out the same introduction. So a moment ago, I almost said, welcome back to the Remso Republic as always. But hey, this is something that we're doing for the first time because we thought, hey, why not? It's fun. We'll go ahead and do a second midweek episode and, have a blast because, hey, it's Halloween. It's basically every pop culture phenomenon's birthday plus Christmas combined. So why not? Welcome to the Remso Republic. This is our very first 2017 Halloween special. For those of you that have been hanging around for a while, hopefully you're a Haunted Republic subscriber through Patreon, so that way you could get to see a chance to see me and producer Ryan and even my father, Remso Sr. and friends scream and crap their pants. But for those that are just podcast listeners and you guys rock and you like all the politics and everything, you know that over the last year I've been sprinkling in some of my hobbies, everything from comic books to understanding, what's going on in pop culture, even cosplaying. And recently we've been getting way more into the paranormal because, the news is scary, politics is scary, but honestly there are some parts of reality that are even scarier. So we're just going to have some fun tonight. Halloween is one of those times where everyone can just act a little bit more ridiculous, but this is going to be a little bit different. I mentioned everything we've been doing. We've been having a great last couple months of Haunted Republic. For those of you that don't know, Haunted Republic is the premium series that Ryan, the show producer, and I do, and we have our first film, St. Albin Sanatorium, out on YouTube. But this is something that we've been a fan of for years, and we first started Haunted Republic because we wanted to go ahead and just do it for fun. We were like, hey, all these other guys on TV are doing this, and I mean, nothing against them, but we're like, we could do better. Got a little machismo going on. But we had this interest going on, even going back to the prior season of the podcast. We had a good friend of the show, Jim Harold, on. For those of you that don't know Jim Harold, one, what the hell is wrong with you? Two, go listen to his show after this. But Jim came on, and, we had a great response from people. And they're like, we come to you for the politics, Remso, but we like, just remembering our humanity. And the great thing about that episode was Jim politely reminded us that one day we're all going to die. when you think about that, you instantly, remember a little bit of the humanity that comes with life, because there's so many unanswered questions that we want to come together with. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, from the Paranormal Podcast and the slew of other things he's doing over at Jim Harold Media, the one and only Jim Harold. Jim, what's going on?
Hey, just here putting out podcasts, and so good to be with you and your audience. And thank you so much for the kind invitation, and glad to talk about spooky stuff. And there's never a better time of the year than now to talk about those kind of things. So thanks for having me.
Not a problem. It would not be a Halloween special without you, especially after, everything I brought up, what we've been doing with Haunted Republic, because Jim, you really did motivate us. But let me tell you some of the crazy nonsense that's been going on in my life ever since you came on. Okay. And folks, I'm going to go ahead and drop some Easter eggs. So this gives you some incentive to go back and listen to some of Jim's older episodes. But there were just some episodes of your show where I was like, okay, these people, like, what are they talking about? And then they happen. We're talking black-eyed kids. We're talking mechanisms, whether it's through a Ouija board or something else, where you could talk to possibly the dead. We're talking about potential shapeshifters and full-body apparitions. And Jim, it's a weird freaking world out there. I'll go ahead and explain more about this, but when you hear some of the amazing phenomenons that people talk about, what usually goes through your head? Because you've been doing this way longer than anyone else I know. Does it ever stop being, surprising and wonderful and shocking and intriguing? Or have you just been like, you're like the last 10 shapeshifter black-eyed kid guys I've spoken to?
Actually, and I'm glad you mentioned it, because I say this a lot of times. It's not like that at all. There's always something new. In fact, today I had a guy call in, and we'll probably have it on this week's show. Usually I kind of do them in chronological order, but this is such a wild call. I have to put it on. And it's probably the weirdest story we've ever had. And the thing is that no, you would think it would become like, okay, this is Shadow Person story 127. But all of them seem to be unique, or most of them at least seem to be unique. And it really speaks to me about how truly weird the world is. It's on the Paranormal Podcast, which is my interview show I do with authors and experts. I just did a show that was released last week about Edison and Tesla and kind of their rivalry and how they were both working on a telephone to the dead. And a lot of that, particularly in the case of Edison, because Edison was not only an inventor, but he was a great businessman. He was kind of like the Steve Jobs of his day because, he had his fingers in a ton of pies, including a little company called General Electric. And that whole chapter of his work was kind of erased from the record because it's like, well, this is embarrassing. Mr. Edison was working on this spiritualist device. And when you have people like, let's not even say Tesla, even though he was a genius, some people think he might have been a bit of a mad scientist, but somebody like Thomas Edison working on a telephone to the dead. And I have another quick thing that happened recently. I won't say what line of work this person is in, but I was talking to them and they said, I saw where you do and it's a very kind of, think about some of the higher planes in life you could achieve professionally. And the person I saw, you do shows on the paranormal, because we weren't talking about the paranormal. And I was fully ready to defend myself. Well, I'm not crazy. And this person, and I started to do that. I went into automatic defense mode. And immediately this person said, no, you get me wrong. I'm very interested in this. And I think the truth is that most of us are deeply, intensely interested in it. Some of us won't say that in public. But you wouldn't believe, I could tell you in the last 3 weeks, just talking to various people out there, and I'll say it, and then I'll say what I do, and then I'll get in defense mode, and then is expecting them to think, oh, they think I'm crazy, and they'll go, hey, you know what happened to me? So I think it's really something most of us are interested in and can relate to. Now, there's a few people say, I don't want to hear anything about that, but I think that's really more so than ever. I think that's the great minority.
Exactly. And, the thing about listening to it is you kind of get these thoughts in your mind. Everyone has these preconceived notions. It's like, when you hear about, a monster or a certain paranormal phenomenon, you kind of keep it in the back of your head. And, what we do is whenever we're about to go conduct a paranormal investigation for our paranormal series, Haunted Republic, we always listen to one of your shows to kind of get us in the mindset of question everything, but go into everything with an optimistic kind of mindset where, you got to enjoy the process. Regardless of what you find or what you don't find, enjoy the process, have fun while you're doing it. And I remember it was about maybe 6 months ago, you had spoken to somebody about shadow figures and shadow people. And I remember, and folks, you can go back and see the first documentary for this on YouTube. There's a part where we're at St. Albans Sanatorium in the basement level. And the thing about producer Ryan is he's a very straight-faced, he won't show any fear or anything type of person. But throughout that night, Jim, because we had listened to that episode, I kept messing around with Ryan, and I'm like, hey, you see that shadow? And he's like, that's a shadow. He's like, here, I'm going to debunk this. Let me show you why this is debunked. And he'll get defensive. But at one point, he's videotaping me interviewing one of our guides, and he just starts flipping out. And I'm like, Ryan, what's wrong? And he's like, I just saw a hand, like a third arm, pop out between you and Brian, the guy you're talking to. And immediately Ryan's just freaked out, and we set up, and we take our stuff and we go to another room because he's just like, I don't want to be here anymore. So at that point on, I'm like, maybe I got Ryan in the mindset for that, and maybe he thinks he saw it. Honestly, I think he may have seen it, but that happened again almost 4 months later. We were going and investigating an old jail out in Warrenton, Virginia. And we're in between the gift shop, the stairwell, and the main living room that, it also used to be a house at one point. And as we're standing like between that open corridor, it's already dark in there, but I see what seems like somebody running across the room. And I look over and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, did that just happen? And then I'm the only one that sees that. So then I'm like, I just need to start getting more of this on video. But it's like, you see this stuff and immediately you go into, okay, am I going crazy mode or is this actually happening mode? I could definitely say that I'm a lot more open to this stuff now, because it's like, okay, if I want people to believe my story, I've got to give them the benefit of the doubt and believe theirs. But Jim, I've got to tell you, there's one thing that you talked about with this one guest that really kind of scarred my entire family, because it targeted something we really love, Walmart. And, it was the story about black-eyed kids. Before I go any further, do you want to go ahead and tell our audience what black-eyed kids are?
Well, black-eyed kids, here's the idea behind it, and it's really, really a spooky one. The idea is that there have been reports over the last 10 or 15 years, I'd say, that people have encountered children. Children will generally be dressed kind of, as I see it, probably in black, but in kind of pale, and they will ask for a ride, or they'll knock on your door and ask to come into your house. It could be one kid or it could be multiple kids, and they're very insistent, and they won't take no for an answer. But what makes them even stranger is the idea that when you look into their eyes are solid black. And this is being reported by people. There have been books written on it. And the thing is that the question is, well, why do they want in? What do they plan to do? And we've had multiple reports on the campfire about this. And in fact, it's funny you mentioned that. I didn't even know you were going to mention this. I bookmarked a story that we had. We may have told it on the last show. I can't remember. This was from my last book. And it was about a gentleman in Tennessee who lived on near college campus, and he had a disturbed evening. He couldn't sleep very well, wasn't hungry, which was very odd for him, he said. And about 1 o'clock in the morning, he heard a rapping on the door, and he ignored it. He was tired, and he was trying to sleep, and this kept happening. And then finally, at about 2:22, he said it was, he went to the door and opened it, and there was a girl standing there, and she was about 13 or 14 years old. And she was looking down at the ground, and the first thing she said to Tony from Tennessee was, "They sent me here." Now, she's looking down at the ground. Keep that in mind. He was really feeling strange, uneasy. And this girl showed up with this cryptic message. So Tony said, "Who sent you here?" She said, "Just please let me in." And then he felt cold air sweep over him, and his stomach was turning. He said he'd never felt that way before. And she was talking in kind of an emotionless, drone-like voice, he said. And she said, "Please let me in." He said, "Look, I'll go grab a phone. You can use the telephone. Do you want to call someone?" She said, "No, please let me in. They sent me here." And he was getting exasperated, so he yelled at her, and he said, "Who sent you here?" And I'm getting the phone and calling the police. She said, "Let me in." He replied, "No, I'm not letting you in." She started getting upset now, agitated. She kept saying, "They sent me here." And she looked up at him and said, "This is only going to take a minute." Now, Tony said, he's never been...
Okay, that's not cool.
This is only going to... Well, you haven't even heard the worst of it. So anyway, he said that he'd never felt so scared in all his life. As soon as his eyes met hers, he realized that they were completely blacked out. Not dilated pupils, but the whole eye itself was black. He said that put him back on his heels. Then and there, he decided that he was calling the police. He turned around and grabbed the phone. When he swiveled around, the girl was gone. And here's the difficulty with these stories. He called the police, told them what happened, and they laughed at him. He said, "A little girl shows up and a grown man is worried about that." And he said, "I wouldn't let her into my apartment anyway, but let alone one with completely black eyes." And the question I have is, why did she want in? And who were they that sent her? I mean, what was the what was the reasoning behind it? I mean, what did they want to accomplish? Did they want to steal his soul? Did they want to do him physical harm? I guess we'll never know.
Oh my gosh. It just gets, it's stuff like that I've done a little bit of research on it, and that's a similar story you hear a lot of. But I mentioned Walmart because there was one guest you had on to talk about that specifically, and he mentioned that a lot of people are seeing these kids outside of Walmarts. And we bring that up to my mom. My brother's like, hey, if you ever see like a kid late at night at Walmart and he has like black eyes, he's basically like a demonic or something. So now it's like everywhere we go, especially Walmart, it's like my parents are like ultra paranoid for black-eyed kids. Because, you go to Walmart late at night and the people there are already shifty. You're like, why the hell are you at Walmart at like 10 p.m. now? And it's, it used to be just a running joke whenever we'd see like, a kid that was like off, and it's like, what are you doing there? Like, this is odd. Why are you just standing there late at night in this location? It was a running joke for the longest time, but like the shadow people, we had something odd happen during our, one of our investigations. It was actually about 20 minutes up the road from us here in Virginia. It was of an old Methodist church. And we were actually going to go investigate the road behind it, because the road behind it used to be an old Civil War hospital staging ground. And we asked if we could use their parking lot, so we didn't park on the side of the road. And they gave us permission to go check out that church. And we investigated. Throughout the night, we're getting some weird stuff. That church has been there since 1748, if you could believe it or not. But at one point, we only have one way in and out of the church, and I'm the only one with the key. So I want to make sure that no one's breaking and entering as we're inside. Right. So I go outside to just check everything. I'm walking back in. It's around 11 p.m. The rest of my team is inside, and as I'm walking past the cemetery, which is parallel to the church, I look over to check out my car, and like out of nowhere, I see this kid in like a gray shirt and gray pants, and he's just looking straight at me. And immediately I'm thinking, oh, it must be like a kid that came to the church or something. Next thing I realize, why is his skin kind of bluish green, and where the hell are his eyes? And as I'm encountering this, I'm like, okay, I just need to turn my head around. I was so freaking scared. Like I am dead serious. I thought I crapped myself. Like, I thought I crapped myself, and I turn and face the door. And it's like, I'm like doing like a power shuffle walk, because I only have 10 feet left. So I'm like, just ignore the freaking kid. You're not his dad. You're not his brother. You're not anyone. Ignore the kid. Why is he just standing there? Is that kid following me? I've never like power shuffled, almost crapped myself, slammed the door so fast and hard in my life.
Wow.
It's odd, because it's like, you hear this stuff, and just like the shadow people and everything else, this type of stuff happened. But with the black-eyed kid, like, that was like one of my biggest fears, because I used to think it was clowns and possessed dolls, but now I'm dealing with freaking kids who are like Satan spawns. So that leads me to this question, Jim. Have you ever encountered any of the paranormal situations that your guests have?
Nothing really terrifying. I've had more kind of positive experiences. And let me say, even this, now, I'll get back to that, and I'll tell you what happened to me. But for me, even the scary stories are affirming, because I'm the kind of person now, I talk to people of all kinds of beliefs, the New Age folks, and a lot of them will tell me, Jim, there's no such thing as evil. It's just a lower vibration. To which, I'm very polite, and I usually don't say it to them on air, but I kind of think poppycock. I think there's evil in the world. You just look at that nut in Las Vegas, for one, a few weeks ago, and that's extremely sad. So I think there's definitely evil, but that means to me there's also good. So in a way, even hearing the scary stories are somewhat affirming to me, because I believe that there's good. And we have a lot of the good stories on the show too. People who's had long lost relatives who passed, who got messages to them, maybe sometimes in dreams, maybe sometimes by appearing, or maybe it was some kind of indirect but very meaningful communication. One thing that happened to me, and you're too young to remember what I'm going to reference here, but anyway.
Try me.
My brother was autistic, and he passed in 1999, and he was about 28 years old at the time. But he was autistic. And we were driving home from the funeral because my family lived down south. And I'm up here in Ohio, in northern Ohio. So I'd just been married a couple of years, and my wife and I were coming back up. And I was flipping through the stations, and there was a station that was what they call music of your life. There's not that many of them anymore, but it was like Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, stuff like that. And I've always enjoyed that kind of music, along with a lot of other kinds. So we put it on. So anyway, I heard this instrumental. And I'm like, that kind of rings a bell, but I can't place it. I don't know what band that is. And it was old-time music. So anyway, we'll just set that aside and tell you a little bit about my brother. My brother loved music. He loved everything from classic country music to, there was a show back in the 70s and 80s called Soul Train. He loved that, soul music, R&B. And then he also, for some reason,
I'm going to stop you right there real fast.
Yeah.
My uncle, who was part of a Latin boy band, was on Soul Train.
Awesome. Don Cornelius. Love and peace. Love it. Love it. So anyway, the funny thing, my brother also liked Lawrence Welk, the Champagne music guy. And I'm old enough that in the 70s, I was a very little kid, but that show was still on the 70s and went on, I think it may still be in reruns on PBS. And my brother absolutely, for some reason, loved Lawrence Welk. So anyway, keep that in mind. We were listening to this tune and I couldn't place it. All of a sudden, the back announce on the radio was, and of course, that was Lawrence Welk with his only number one hit, Calcutta from 1960. And my jaw just dropped, because what are the chances, first of all, I mean, even as somebody who would listen to a station like that, because I like Sinatra, Nat King Cole, Dean Martin, stuff like that, Rat Pack kind of stuff, I don't remember ever hearing Lawrence Welk on one of those stations. And what are the chances, in a rural area when you're trying to get a station, it goes in, it goes out, that I was in the right place at the right time to pick up that station playing that song that they probably play extremely rarely. It would have been different if it would have been a popular song, at the time, even if it had been like an oldie station, or even not that old at that time, but like a Michael Jackson song or a popular band at the time. But it was Lawrence Welk. What were the chances? To me, that was my brother getting a point across. And the thing was, that was way before I did the podcast. I was just a guy who was interested in this stuff. And I've gone on to hear story, and just unusual ways that the dead can get back to us. So the spooky stuff is there. The scary stuff is there. It's a part of life. But there's also the happy and the good side, and cases where the paranormal can actually be affirming.
Definitely. No, I totally agree. And, I've had a similar incident to that. I don't necessarily think it was paranormal, but, I brought up my uncle earlier. Like, I'm not joking. He was part of a group called C Note. He was actually one of the original Backstreet Boys. He was replaced by Joey Fatone in the 90s. So before they became big, my uncle Brody was part of that band. He ended up getting replaced by Joey Fatone, and then after that, he went on to form C Note, which they basically did similar style boy band music, but they were big in Latin America. And he wrote a song called Spanish Fly, and I'm gonna try and keep things G-rated, but people who have heard that term could probably take a guess. Whenever I've ever heard that song anywhere in my life, like something crazy has always happened, like a car accident happens in front of me, or I bomb a test, or something really embarrassing happens, or a flight gets delayed. And it's not like my uncle's dead or anything. He's alive and kicking in Orlando. But I always tell him, it's like, each time I hear that song that you and your boy band wrote back in like the early 90s, something bad happens. It's weird. It's weird. And folks, feel free to go Google that at your own risk, Spanish Fly by Sino. But no, I totally believe it. I was speaking to somebody at one of the sites we were investigating, and she claimed that, a few months after her grandmother had died, she received a phone call from her telling her that she was okay.
Yep, we've had people talk about phone calls from the dead and those kind of things. Absolutely, because I guess, and again, I never say I'm an expert on this, Remzo, because I don't really know that there are any experts, and I think there may be people who are better read. There may be people who have done a ton of research. I mean, and I think there's certainly people who know more than others, and there are many that know more than me. But I would never say I'm an expert. But I got to think that maybe it's not that easy to communicate, or it's not like they can just pop up and do a full body apparition. So they communicate with us in the ways that we can. Now, again, that's just a guess on my part. I'm just like everybody else. I've got a lot of questions when I get over to that other side, but I'm willing to wait. I can hold on to my questions, another 50 years or so.
I mean, with the number of dead zones with Verizon, there might as well be some beyond reality. That, or it's like, oh, that you can get good signal here or something. Let's go ahead and call them.
Yeah. Well, I do believe there are paranormal portals. There's certain places, whether it's a relation of ley lines, that tend to be spookier than others. And if you want to you want to use the Big Ten approach and get into UFOs and stuff, you look at the American Southwest, how active that place seems to be in terms of UFOs. Now, maybe that has something to do with all those military installations there. I don't know. But I think when it comes to the paranormal, some places are definitely more spooky than others.
Definitely. Now, Jim, this is Halloween, so I want to go ahead and give people something that they can go ahead and share with their family. And folks, if you're not already sharing this episode, then you're doing it wrong. But what if there's something you want to go ahead and, get the kids around, because there are a lot of family men and women that listen to this show. You want to go ahead and get the kids around, and you just want to, have a good old, let's sit around the fire and read a story. You've written several different campfire books. I'm wondering, is there any one story from any of those that really just kind of pops out at you that you'd be willing to share?
Yeah, actually, the one that pops out is probably the most popular one I've done, and it's about a roadhouse. So the story goes is this, and actually this was just featured on another huge podcast out there. I put them in touch with this caller because it's such a great story. This woman's name is T.I., and she's from Michigan. And she was going out with a friend of hers, a male friend, and they were going to go see a band. And this was in kind of a rural area in Wisconsin. And they closed the place, and they stayed afterwards and talked to the band. And it was time to leave. It was after 2:00 in the morning. So they left. They had about an hour to their destination. And T.I. told her friend, Bob, said, well, I've got to go to the restroom once they got going. And they were about an hour away from, where they were going. And he said, well, I can always stop by the side of the road here. And she said, no, just drive fast. So they went on for a while. And then they came to this bar, this roadhouse set off by itself. And the thing of it is that it was hopping. The lights were on, there were cars, and it's like, well, it's after 2:00 and it's unusual, but hey, let's not look a gift horse in the mouth. So they walked in. Bob went and got them something from the bar, something to drink. T.I. went and answered the call of nature and came back. And they were talking. It was kind of weird because everybody was kind of smiling at them, but not really talking. Just kind of, it was just really strange. And Bob mentioned he's really glad that they came there because there was this full-size mural on the one wall, and it was in this Old West motif. And he was an artist, and he was anxious to see it. So they started examining it and looking at it. And the thing that was weird was everybody that was in the painting was in the bar. There was a young guy who was kind of a strapping guy. He was a bartender. He was in the painting. There were a couple ladies sitting at the bar. They were at the table. There were some guys sitting over at a table. They were on the picture. So all the people in the picture were actually physically in the bar. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird. And then they started talking and said, well, maybe these are regulars and the artist did this to kind of, kind of as a salute. And these people are here. You could come any night and they're here. So anyway, this weird guy comes up to T.I. and asks her to dance. And he has a song on the jukebox. Let's Twist Again by Chubby Checker. Even I'm too young to remember that on its first go
I'm not going to pretend to have ever heard of Chubby Checker. That sounds
You've never heard of Chubby Checker?
That sounds like a rapper. I feel like I should
look
be like,
look him up. He's the king of the twist. It was before my time, but I'm a little bit of a music historian. So
is
anyway,
it like the twist from Pulp Fiction?
Yeah, kind of. But the
Travolta?
different song,
Okay.
the actual twist, look it up. Somebody will tell you what the twist is. But anyway, so it was Let's Twist Again. And it comes back in the story. That's why I mentioned. So anyway, T.I. Actually had canes. And she said in this case, she was glad she had them because she held one up and kind of begged this off. And she said it was a really nasty guy. He smiled. He had these rotten teeth. It was really disgusting. Just very strange. Again, he didn't talk. He just kind of, he was kind of motioning. It was just really weird. So anyway, they kind of chuckle to themselves and they start talking about the painting again. And they're looking at the painting and there's these two swinging doors like they have in the old Westerns, right? When the guy comes in a saloon and says, "Where's Bad Bart?" That kind of thing. So anyway, there's like a mist developing where the door is. And there's two figures. And they're kind of like they're like developing like the old Polaroid pictures back in the day. And you can't make them out, but there's two figures. One's taller than the other. And then they look back and it's a little more developed. And one's a woman and one's a man. And the woman's quite a bit shorter than the man. And then they look back again and it's even a little more developed. And the woman has boots. T.I. has boots. Also, the woman has a cane. And they look at it and they realize that what's developing into the picture is them. So immediately, they say, "Let's get out of here." So anyway, and this is not even the good part of the story. So they start to go out and all of the people are like waving them back, beckoning him in, like, come back. And they ignore that. When they close the door, everything goes stone silent on the outside. No lights, no nothing, like it was never opened at all. And there is a car in the parking lot. It's their car. So they get the heck out of there, but it's still not the end of the story. It gets even curiouser.
Oh, gosh.
Of all two things, and one has with some validation here of this story. T.I. comes back with her friend a couple nights later, a female friend. And she says, "I was brave, but I wasn't that brave. We went before it got dark." And she walks in. And anyway, she sees a bartender. It's a woman. And the mural's still on the wall. And, of course, T.I. and Bob are not in the mural. But she's talking to this bartender. She said, "Yeah, I was here the other night. There was a big, good-looking guy behind the bar. Bartender, kind of burly." And she said, "We don't have anybody like that. The only other bartender here is my dad." And then T.I. looked at the jukebox. Now, the jukebox, I should have mentioned in the original story, they had this old vinyl jukebox that played actual old-time records. This one played CDs. And by the way, Chubby Checker, apparently whoever put that jukebox in hadn't heard of him either because he wasn't anywhere to be found. Now, so T.I. left. Now, here is the little bit of interesting twist, if that's not enough for you. I have had listeners go, and they have found the Roadhouse, and it is a real place. It exists. They put pictures on my Facebook group, which is Jim Harold's Virtual Campfire, by the way, if you want to check it out, folks. It's free. And there is such a place, and there is an Old West mural. So this place really does exist. This is not something that was invented. So I don't know, Remzo. I don't know what T.I. ran into. It sounded like kind of Twilight Zone time warp or something. But I'm glad she got out of there. That. So that one, you asked for one that sticks out. That one definitely sticks out.
Anyone that's going to bring up a artist named Chubby Checker obviously has some, like an actual experience going on, because it's sometimes just those random little things that just kind of happen. It's like, okay, why on earth would you pull out that just one random detail?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
That's so strange. I learned as, a young college student, while I was back in college, I learned very soon back when I was going to school in Alabama at the time. I went to a 2-year military college. If you see a roadhouse or something on the side of the road or an old gas station, like, don't pull over, because you're going to find like the most random things, and it will instantly turn into a Twilight Zone episode. I mean, the closest thing I have to something like that was a group of my friends went to the University of Alabama homecoming game against Georgia Tech back in 2014, 2013-ish. And long story short, we're driving back and forth between Marion, Alabama and Tuscaloosa. We're picking up some friends that got left behind, and we're drinking. And then they're like, I don't know what an Uber is. Somebody save me. So we end up being the paddy wagon that night. And at one point, my roommate, Marco, and we pull over. It's like around 10:30. We pull over to the only gas station in the middle of this country road that has any lights on, and we're like, hey, let's get a couple of Monster Energy drinks to keep us going, because by the time we get back, it'll be like pushing 1 a.m. So I go over and I find, all the lights are on, but it's closed. So I try and open the door. I'm like, oh, maybe there's like a side door. So I try and find the door. Next thing you know, I go back. I'm walking towards the car, and this guy behind the door of the gas station starts banging on it, yelling at me. And the first thought that came through my head was that movie, The Hills Have Eyes, because I look over at him. It's like he's got all these sores and he's wearing overalls. And I'm like, okay, this is the night I die. So I've never I jumped through the window. Like, I was a lot more athletic back then. All the windows were down. I didn't even open the door. I jumped through the window, and my roommate drives off, and like half my body's like hanging out the truck. I never told my parents that, because then they'd be like, what the hell are you doing? Oh, why didn't you just open the door? But yeah, I mean, things like that. It's sometimes I wonder how people get themselves into these situations.
Well, just this weekend, I took my kids to a concert, and it was one of those concerts like mainly for teenagers, so I had no interest in. So,
you were the token dad.
Yeah, it was about hour and 20 minutes from the house or something. So I didn't want to drive back home. So I had to find a place, and I swear, and this was actually very cool, and I actually want to go back to the place. I walked into I was looking for a coffee shop. Right next to the coffee shop was an ice cream parlor. And I walked in this place, and I swear it looked like something out of 1964. It looked like, if you've ever seen that TV series, which I highly recommend, 11/22/63, that's on Hulu, that's based on a Stephen King book. I felt like that guy, that I was walking into the early 60s. And most places, when they try to do retro, you can look around and you can see something like, well, they wouldn't have an HD TV in 1962.
They wouldn't have a CD jukebox.
Yeah, exactly. But this place had none of that. And I'm like, oh my God. And doing what I do, I'm like, hey, is the universe playing a trick on me? Because it looked kind of old when I walked in there, but it had a soda fountain, like they used to have soda jerks and stuff. And I'm like, what in the world did I just get myself into? But in the end, it ended up being very nice. And I actually want to go back there sometime during the day when I can take some pictures and stuff. But wow, I was just like, whoa, is this like the road? Is this like, well, that right there you go. But yeah, it'll be like ultra modern, right? But I mean, I'm like, is this like a payback for the Roadhouse Saloon story I've told so many times? Is it my own version? But apparently some people have commented on my Facebook page, and it's well known in the Akron area where I was at. So I guess it's real. It's not something from the Twilight Zone. But I felt it was dark and it was a little misty outside. I felt very Twilight Zone-y. It was pretty cool, actually.
Life is weird. You never know. Sometimes, when you're into this type of stuff, you get into those situations and it's like, what if this is not what it seems? Anyway, Jim, thank you so much for coming on the program. This has been an absolute blast. If people want to check out any of your campfire books, subscribe to your show, the whole shebang, how could they do so?
Just go to jimharold.com, JIMHAROLD.com. That's jimharold.com. They can find the books. They can find the podcasts, wherever fine podcasts are heard and where they're listening to this one.
Perfect. Folks, I'm going to go ahead and include all of those links in the show notes, so definitely go check that out on the website after listening to this. We're going to go ahead and take a quick break. We've got our good friend Dave Cruz from Beyond the Strange Radio coming on right after this.
Take the show
on the go by subscribing to the Rimzo Republic on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, TuneIn, Google Play, and YouTube. Don't be left out.
Hey folks, hope you've been enjoying this Halloween special. Didn't want to go ahead and just, bombard the fun and everything with a bunch of commercials, but there is one thing I kind of want to tell you. This show can't happen without your support. Like literally, our supporters, our listeners, our readers, all of you who have ever engaged with the Remso Republic and Team Republic in any way are keeping this whole thing alive. But just wanted to let you know, you can go ahead and get so much more after the season ends, because we've got a few months of time to go ahead and do some super secret fun stuff to get ready for season 4. And some of you are going to be like, well, I've got a Remso Republic deficit in my life. On Patreon for $1, just $1, you get exclusive access to everything Haunted Republic and get to be part of our next episode. On top of that, regarding what level you subscribe at, you can go ahead and get extra episodes of our satire special with Token Republic featuring my cousin Rodrigo. You can go ahead and get the bi-monthly episodes of Mystery Pulp Theater, where me and sometimes a couple of friends will go ahead and talk about what's new in comics and sci-fi and movies and stuff like that. That's a lot of fun. And some additional stuff like, signed comics, signed books, swag, and so much more. On top of that, you're helping us reinvest back into the program, so we don't have to do a lot of commercials. But hey, this is a Halloween special, right? What does that mean? It means right after this, you're probably going to start saving up and wondering, what do your friends and loved ones want for Christmas? Those Black Friday sales are going to be coming up pretty soon. Go ahead and check out our friends at Libertarian Country. I wear their shirts. They're awesome. They're for the libertarian or conservative or just overall smartass in your life. Really inexpensive quality fun t-shirts. Go ahead and help us out. Go to our website, www.remsorepublic.com. You'll go ahead and see a banner for Libertarian Country on top of the site. Click that, and whatever purchase you make, a little bit comes back to support the show. And you look great in the process and save a little bit of money. So, speaking of that, Patreon, $2 up, you also get exclusive discounts. So if let's say you want to go ahead and get a lot for a little, that's another reason to go there. So go ahead. It's at the top banner of our website, Libertarian Country. And that's about it, folks. Now back to the show. Folks, thanks for hanging on. We're continuing on with our very first Halloween special. It's so great to have had Jim Harold on to discuss some of the stories from his awesome campfire novels. Definitely go ahead and click the show notes on our website and go ahead and support Jim. You could share those stories with your friends and family and basically anyone that needs a good scare before, not necessarily just before you go to sleep, but maybe just sometimes during the day. You just need something to say, hey, let's go ahead and look at something strange. Speaking of that, I want to go ahead and kind of wrap up the show on a lot more of a laid back note. This is this is a holiday in itself. People try and, kind of write off Halloween, but for the most part, it's a day that I think celebrates the strangeness of humanity. And when you're talking about strange, there's no one better than somebody that knows beyond the strange a little bit more than that. And yeah, my pun was terrible. But ladies and gentlemen, Dave Cruz from Beyond the Strange Radio. Dave, what's going on?
Hey, Remso. How you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Not a problem. So, Dave, something that we spoke about with Jim a while back, and we touched it a little bit before during the first half, is that regardless of what culture, regardless of where you are, regardless of what, kind of era you came in, especially the last couple hundred years, there's just a love of Halloween. And I've got a further question that I kind of want to carry this on to, but first I want to start off with something a little bit basic. What are your Halloween traditions? Or do you have any? Or none?
No, sure. We Well, as you know, I have quite the family. We have 5 kids. They're all older now, but one is a teenager, and I don't know if she's going to be going out this year. She's a little big now, but she still loves the spirit. We normally go trick or treating, and that's been the tradition, as well as passing out candies and watching scary movies, all that stuff, until the wee hours of the morning.
Yeah, I think the 2 films that I always try and watch back to back are Shaun of the Dead and From Dusk Till Dawn. It's those films. I don't know why, but I have to go through those 2 films within the 24-hour period on Halloween. But, people have some strange traditions. Some people carve out giant pumpkins with the faces of celebrities. Others go out and they go into massive raves. But the interesting thing is, it seems like in this past year especially, every day's been kind of like a different flavor of Halloween to a specific degree. You go ahead and you watch TV, and it used to be only for like the month of October, you'd have like the 31 days of Halloween. And then from there, you're seeing all your favorite paranormal or sci-fi oriented shows on TV that they would never typically air during the year. And now you turn on every channel, and every Tom, Dick, and Paul has a different ghost hunting show. And then in terms of films, we actually had an increase in the number of horror films. This year we had the movie It, which is now the highest grossing horror film of all time. And then when you just go ahead and look at the overall interest in the paranormal throughout our culture, you see that now it's something that people are not necessarily, I'm going to say, embracing, but it seems to be more prevalent this year than any other time period that I can remember. Do you agree with that, or do you think there's something that may be a little bit off?
I totally agree. I just feel that people are embracing more traditions as the year goes on. And Halloween is definitely, it's always been one of them. But I think more and more Halloween is becoming more of a tradition than, some of our more famous traditions like Christmas or Easter. Of course, they're, Judeo-Christian. You have Halloween, who's kind of based on, either All Saints Day or Samhain. But I feel that it's just becoming a lot more popular, in the mainstream. And I think it's great. I've always loved Halloween. Sometimes I like it better than Christmas myself.
I could totally see that. One thing that has kind of been popping through my head has been this. We have a culture that's kind of obsessed with doomsday, and we've definitely been seeing it the last decade primarily. It seems the biggest, most acclaimed films each year are all focusing around like the end of the world, apocalyptic scenarios. You look at any type of futuristic film, and it's not always Tomorrowland. More often than not, it's a dystopian fascist wasteland. And that's the sad thing about, a lot of people that I see around who are, my millennial peers. You listen to the music that they're listening to, and it's very nihilistic. You look at the most popular series on Netflix right now, it's 13 Reasons Why, which is all about suicide. You brought it up earlier that a lot more people are, definitely embracing and celebrating Halloween more so than a lot of the Judeo-Christian holidays. And I'm glad you brought that up, because the thing that's been kind of popping up on my mind is, I enjoy Halloween for the pure facts that it's the time that everyone can act weird and they can all go and, believe in things that most people might not believe in when it comes to the supernatural. But it seems like it's also kind of an embracing of, we're all going downhill. This is the time where we can celebrate death to a degree. And as one of my friends from Liberty University put it, it's embracing the culture of death. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that what you said earlier about what's happening today is it seems like everyone has been falling into that category of feeling that there's a doomsday scenario going around. it does seem like the world's getting more violent. I mean, we know that there's been a rash of different types of disturbing happenings, if you will, as far as the weather, violence, terrorism, and then there's also the impending doom of, being, in a nuclear war with different countries. It's always there. I think it's always been there, but like you said, it seems like it is more. It's been going on more recently and more frequently. I think also that as far as with death, because we're in today's society that basically researches everything, including what happens after you die. And we're finding a lot more evidence that there is possibly a hereafter, and that the soul continues to go on after the body, passes away. So, I feel that maybe what's happening is because of course we're an internet society now, that we're gathering more information. We're finding a lot more data that supports that our soul continues to live on, and there is a life after death or after this world.
I totally agree. And it seems like on Halloween, it's the part of the year where people, it seems like because they're getting caught up in the festivities that, they're more open to entertain those ideas. Do you think we're seeing a revival in terms of interest in the paranormal outside of just, the Halloween season? Because I don't understand why now we're seeing kind of I don't know if it's necessarily a bandwagon effect. I mentioned all those shows earlier. You look at Destination America, and if you were to just judge the United States based off that channel, it's nothing but food trucks and ghost hunts. And now you look at History Channel, and it used to be Samantha Brown, and now it's mainly, different hotels you can go see dead people in. And then History Channel is essentially which homeless trucker went ahead and met up with the Pickers, who are now investigating ancient aliens whose ghosts surround the world. So it seems kind of strange. Why do you think there's this renewed interest? I think it kind of loops everything together when you think about it, because what we've seen is that there's something impending with the culture, there's something changing of the mindsets of people, and then it seems like now everything is just kind of colliding into a moment. I don't know if this is necessarily a time where people are just really, really getting active in this stuff, and we're going to see it continue, or if it's something that's going to die down within the next year. I kind of like to make predictions when it comes to shows like this. So next year, I'm going to go ahead and listen back to this episode and say, okay, what did I get right or what did I not get right? So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I totally agree with you too. I mean, whenever I do a recording or I do a show, I do look back a year and I say to myself, wow, was I really doing that back then? And so I know what you're saying about that. And you may be right that there may be something a year from now that we didn't catch, but I think what's happening is the culture is definitely more popular than ever, especially with ghost hunting. And you yourself has recently started doing the ghost hunting, and I know that it changed your life, because with me, when I first did my first investigation, I was totally caught off guard, and it was a rush. I have to say it was amazing, and I wanted to do it again. I feel that people are seeing this culture not only on TV but on internet programs, radio. They're finding more and more information. It's a lot more in Hollywood. I'm seeing a lot more trend, like you were talking about, like with it, that there is a supernatural culture happening, and it is reviving and it's getting stronger. And I just feel that it's just something that's that's happening right now because more people are informed. I think the key word is informed or information, and more people are getting that information, and what they're doing with it is they're acting on it instead of just not paying attention to it like before. People wouldn't believe that there was ghosts. You can see ghosts on the internet everywhere. Some of it's not real. I'll have to say that there's some pretty bad CGI videos out there, but there's some really good, compelling videos that look like, very good evidence. So my take would be that it is definitely because we're in the information age.
Definitely. And, one thing that I have tried to open my mind to since the last time we spoke was the fact that I'm trying to really go out and question the things that I think are ridiculous. Because I think an issue I may have had with some people that checked out Haunted Republic is that I quickly, I start off my whole journey with saying, okay, I'm going to debunk this stuff. And towards the middle part of it, because I'm not going to say there's an end, because it's while one episode or one film might end, the journey still continues. I've definitely had a change of heart, as you mentioned earlier. And to kind of get, not necessarily off topic, but to kind of branch forward, one thing that I have been looking into have been cryptids, monsters, aliens, and I'm not going to say supernatural beings, because I know there's another word for it, but basically like, black-eyed children, for example. When it comes to those things outside of just, ghosts, spirits, and demons, how much credibility do you give to like the people that say, oh, I've seen Bigfoot, or oh, I've seen the Chupacabra or the Jersey Devil or something, or oh, there's an alien over in West Virginia? I typically kind of write those people off, but recently I've been kind of looking more into those stories to try and see, okay, what are the common trends, and is there something, that's actually here? What do you usually think of that?
I usually put myself in their shoes. And what I mean by that is, again, I have to refer to my first ghost hunting investigation. When I first started watching those shows, I told myself it is totally fake. There's no way that they're getting this stuff on camera in real time, the way it's happening. And I'm not saying that when I did my investigation that, things were flying off the bar, or, people were, whispering in my ear or anything like that. But what I know is I had my experience. I had enough of an experience to say that what I felt was real. And so therefore I have to say, hey, who am I to say somebody didn't see I'm not even going to go with UFO because that's so generic nowadays, that someone didn't see a
flying saucer thing, a
flying saucer, a spaceship, a ball of light, an orb, whatever you want to call it, and so that's where I put myself in. I put myself in their shoes, and I know that I've seen things as well in the sky. I don't know. I can't explain it. As far as cryptids go, I've never ran into anything like a Bigfoot or a Chupacabra or something like that. But I will say that I've been paying attention to reports after this eclipse that we just had in August. Actually, during the eclipse, there was supposedly a lot of sightings, but it wasn't Bigfoot. It was more like reptilian type lizard people that.
Oh no!
Well, here's the
where I'm going with that.
here's the deal. Here's the deal, Remzo. Okay, it is a well-known fact. A well-known fact that there have been stories.
If I was not mentally awake before, I sure as hell am now. Please continue.
Awesome. I got right on. I'm glad I got your blood pumping now. But no, there's been stories that have come out of like the Everglades of Florida and swamp areas where these lizard people were seen, and stories come out of there. But after and during the eclipse, there seemed to have been more cryptid activity, and most of them are these reptilians, not so much as like the kind that you see on the series V, where they look like people and then they rip off the face and then they look like lizards, but they're just straight lizard people. They're like tall lizards, and there could be a scientific explanation for that.
Are they walking upright?
They are walking upright.
Okay, because I definitely have
seen.
I have seen giant lizards that are like bigger than most children, and
Sure.
It's, man, when it comes to the lizard people thing, like okay, I'll go ahead and say I will listen to somebody that says they've seen Bigfoot. When it comes to the lizard people thing, like this is an area where it's become so saturated with like Illuminati, Jewish banking conspiracies, and ancient aliens, where it's just I don't know where the crazy ends and the legend begins. But when it comes to lizard people, what's your take on it? Is it just that you're interested in the fact that they have been spotted more, or do you have like maybe your own beliefs as to whether or not there's some validity to the claims? Because when it comes to the lizard people, I'm going to call it a conspiracy. I've heard it like 30 ways to Sunday. So what's your take on that?
My take on the lizard people is that throughout history, and I'm talking about even ancient history, you have drawings or cryptographs, whatever you want to call them, on walls, on tablets, on pottery, sometimes even in paintings, where there is some sort of reptilian humanoid looking creature. You could go all the way back to the Bible. He talks about the serpent who used to have arms and legs, and after what happened with Adam and Eve, was forced to crawl on its belly. So there's a lot of talk about this even before ancient aliens. So that's kind of where I'm going with it. Not so much as the president is a reptilian, or whatever.
I mean, we all knew.
Or excuse me,
a reptilian.
the Queen of England. There you go. The nice lady with the funny hat. she's a reptilian, and her family are full of reptilians, and that's the thing is, you take it as far as you want to take it. Whether or not people are going to believe you, that's another thing. I've actually heard a person by the name of David Icke who talks about reptilians, and of course that is a conspiracy about that these reptilians are in government, they're shapeshifters, they want to take over the world. My take on what the reptilians I was talking about is more of a cryptid, under cryptozoology, where these can be more studied if you try to do some kind of scientific method, if you will, and do the research that way, do the investigation that way. Where are there prints? Are there scales? I mean, do that kind of thing. And if you do find something, have it analyzed. I mean, it could be some kind of an ancient alligator, or who knows what it is. But I do know, even in Hollywood, I'm going to date myself by saying this TV show I used to watch when I was a kid. It was called Land of the Lost, and there was these beings, these type of beings, whatever you want to call them, that were called Sleestaks. Those are your typical reptilians that are very tall, they're very muscular, and they have the very, the big black eyes and the little, holes for a nose, and a slit for a mouth. But, and they could communicate telepathically. This, like I said, it seems to be reoccurring in history and in Hollywood media, whatever you want to call it. But like I said, as far as the whole, take over the world, New World Order, whatever you want to call it, I'm still I'm not even on the fence. I'm just kind of like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah,
but
I totally get where you're coming from. I think the one thing I will say that could possibly sway me over when it comes to that whole thing is that when you look at a lot of the descriptions of those beings from like ancient Egypt, for example, you brought up the hieroglyphics and stuff, and a few of the other things throughout history, and you look at scripture. I think lepers may have been confused for inhuman-like people. Because you look at, leprosy when it was really bad, several hundred years ago. I mean, people are losing their noses, their skin is so scabbed over, they don't even look human. So I think there may possibly be a tie between lepers who are social outcasts and lizard people sightings. I mean, that's probably the one thing that could get me on.
Yeah, and again, there's so many things out there that can grab either your fascination, your obsession, whatever you want to call it. Like I said, there's people out there who make their living on this stuff, and that's all well and good.
Do that. Like, in all honesty, if I could go ahead and start like a lizard people cult and make a lot of money off of it, like that would be interesting. I could probably there was a Netflix documentary where this guy pretended to be like the reincarnation of Gandhi or something. He created his own like Hindu/Buddhist religion, went out to California, tricked a bunch of people, and then by the end of it, he was like, okay, this was a hoax. And then you still have people that think this is some type of giant test. So I could probably, that might be a good documentary idea. Start the lizard people cult. You want in? You want in on that?
I want to. I like it. I like it. Yeah, absolutely. I want to even take that a little bit further and maybe even go off track a little bit with this whole supernatural type genre. I'm really starting to believe that people will believe anything. And I don't think it's because they're gullible. I think it's just some kind of programming. Does that make sense?
I'm on board with you. I mean, as a libertarian, like I would say that, you look at social, academic, and biological controllers by the federal government are definitely controlling people. But even when you take that out of the equation and you just look at the art of influence, a really good podcast I've been listening to is called Cults, and it's from the people that do like serial killers and all the other stuff on iTunes. Really great podcast. The first couple episodes were about the Manson family, and right now I'm learning about Heaven's Gate. It's one of the most famous UFO cults. And the one thing that you get from a lot of these cults is that it's like anything else. It's like any type of movement. You have very strong, charismatic people that are able to, reach into your emotions, and then, people are going out and they're murdering folks on their behalf and they're committing mass suicide. So I definitely do think there's just something with people that leads them to believe and do crazy things. I mean, it's you see it every day, whether it's a cult for a personality or a singer or something. It isn't confined to one time period that people can be easily swayed by, someone that just exudes a bit of confidence or just some very good, like art of influence type of styles. So I could definitely believe that.
And I hate to relate it to religion, but I'm going to go there for just a second because
I mean, how else does Joel Osteen have all that money?
Thank you very much. You read my mind. I think you're psychic. So there you go. Now we can get into that later about being a medium. But no, seriously though, I was going to talk about Joel Osteen, and you know what? More power, I guess, to have all those people send him all that money for what he talks about. And my thing is, you know what? If like what happened in, with the hurricanes, right? I really believe he responded poorly, and and he should have been able to. He should have exactly. He should have opened up his church or his doors, or whatever you want to call them, and a stadium, basically, and let these people in for a little while and take care of them. I mean, the guy wouldn't have missed it. I mean, he's a billionaire, I'm sure, or maybe just a mega multimillionaire. But
yeah, I mean, with the whole Joel Osteen thing, I mean, as much shit as I want to talk about him, he did have one legitimate thing. It's that for the number of people that they would have been able to bring in, they didn't have the adequate, bathrooms and additional things that they would have needed. Now that's happenstance. They could have ordered that afterwards. People need food and shelter now, so I don't really think they care if they've got to share a couple toilets of a whole bunch of people. But I mean, Joel Osteen's like the perfect supervillain in a way, because what he's been able to do is really, bring the apostate church to the next level. What he does is he gives lip service to the Bible and the gospel every once in a while. He gives what are essentially highbrow self-help talks, and then what he says is you can't do anything unless you go ahead and wire him like $50 a pop every Sunday. And, while people are out there dying and people are homeless and people actually need the church to go out and reach to them, Joel Osteen is with his hot wife and his private jet, and he's wearing suits that cost like more than my entire wardrobe. I mean, religions like that. I think, the thing about cults that I've been researching is that it usually does something to undermine the core tenets of an affixed religion. You look at Heaven's Gate, for example, and they tried to initially tie themselves to Christianity. And, that's how they lure people in, and they do things that contradict the core religion. I'd probably throw Joel Osteen in that category because his wife is out writing blogs that say, don't care about other people, take care of yourself first. Yeah, if you're dealing with a self-development thing, but when you're looking at the real mission of the gospel, that juxtaposes everything. So it's scary.
Yeah, totally not what Jesus would do.
Nah, I don't think Jesus really wore Joseph A. Banks or whatever. He's probably wearing something more expensive than Joseph A. Banks. I mean, come on. If you're going to be Joel Osteen, you're wearing some Italian suits right now.
Right.
Speaking of which, when it comes to these UFOs, something that, and this is what I kind of want to end the show on, UFO cults were a thing in the late 80s and the early 90s, and now more people are starting to jump back into these UFO-centered, let's call them religions to be polite, more so than in the past decade and a half. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's been a number of them, in the years. I mean, I think it kind of started. I don't think it started with Roswell. But we all know that that's kind of where the genre started taking off. But I really believe it started more with the Scientologist movement. And I know that they don't talk about, UFOs or anything like that. But, from what I understand, L. Ron Hubbard was, he was a ufologist. And there's a lot of other different UFO cults, I guess you want to call them. Heaven's Gate was one of them. We talked about that earlier. There's another one called Ground Crew Project, Cosmic Circle of Fellowship. There's quite a few out there, and yes, again, Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard, was one of them. What I think about that is extraordinary claims, deserves extraordinary proof. You got to have the proof to back up your claims. And if you don't have a little green man in your closet or a spaceship, underneath your bed, I'm sorry.
Or a lizard person.
Or a lizard person. You can't forget the lizard guy. I'm sorry, but I personally am not going to believe you. Somebody else might, There's a lot of New Agers who are going towards that movement, and one of them being David Wilcock and Corey Good. If you haven't researched them, you'll know what I'm talking about once you Google them and once you start to find out more about their story. It sucks because it's almost like church again. You see the little dish coming around asking for tithing and stuff, but they're doing it on the internet and they're doing it through radio programming, and now they're doing it through Gaia. I'm sure you've heard of Gaia.
They're doing it through there?
Oh yeah.
I'm not a subscriber. I just know about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, when you become a subscriber, where do you think the money's going to?
That makes sense now.
So right there, you can look at that as just a medium for the cult to gain their profit, their revenue. It's all public information, by the way.
I'm telling you, man, this lizard people conspiracy theory is probably holding up water. I'm starting to see the connections now. Anyway,
starting to see dollar signs.
I'm starting to see dollar signs, merchandising, branding. I'm going to live forever at this point. If I can make this work, I'll go ahead and make it seem like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and start a cult where we believe that Joel Osteen is a lizard person, and when he finally sheds his skin, we're all going to go ahead and transcend to the great UFO goddess, Frog Lord Trejo or something like that. I could totally make this work. I could see a book deal in the future. I mean, I could totally,
definitely.
I could run for president based off of this. And there are people that would probably donate their entire life savings just because they want to go ahead and believe in something absolutely crazy because they need something exciting in their life. But hey, that's why we have Halloween. So once a year, we can pull out the strange, the crazy, and the weird and have a fun time doing so. Dave, thank you so much. If people want to go ahead and check out your show, catch up with you on social media and everything else, how could they do so?
Yeah, they can go to www.beyondthestrange.com. It has all the links and all the information of the show when the show airs. The guest, there's links to past guests and archives. You can find Beyond the Strange Radio on Facebook, and you can find me also, Dave Cruz, on Facebook, also on Twitter at Strange Days 2015, and you can follow me at Strange Dave 70.
Outstanding. Dave Cruz, thank you so much for coming on, and have a happy Halloween. Folks, this is something that I'd like to keep going on every Halloween in the future because we get to step aside from politics. If politics is your life, as a wise man once told me, you need a new hobby. So go out, have fun, take a load off, and, maybe go watch Haunted Republic. I don't know. Not pitching too much. Good night, America.
Stay up to date with the latest news and updates by visiting
RemzoRepublic.com.